kind of an embarrassment usually for me because I wake up with a bunch of texts of like, whoa, the Jaguars are on. Because like, people are shocked that this team is on watchable television and you don't have to go to, NFL Reddit streams just to catch a glimpse of this game. So.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Monkey Knife Fights NFL Preview Show Week 8 edition. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, the great Nick Whalen of Rotowire.com. Nick, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It is Jags London week. This is a kind of a national holiday for those of us in the Jaguars community. Obviously, we've fallen on hard times of late. They found a way to really Jaguar last week's game up against the Giants. I'm expecting more of the same against the Denver Broncos. I mean, what a matchup that's going to be. We got Russell Wilson doing high knees on a plane over the Atlantic Ocean en route to London. We're looking forward to another, crazy week in the NFL. We were just talking off air about how unpredictable this season has been. We're certainly not the first people to bring up that point, but no team feels safe. No line feels safe. One team being a 10.5-point favorite at home doesn't feel like it means anything anymore.
No, not at all. And I'm glad you brought up the Jags in London. When I was doing my prep for this show and I see, that game's in London this week, I was excited to talk to you about this because I want to know. You're a pro at this by now. The Jags, this will be their ninth time playing in London. I want to know, what is Nick Whalen's London Jaguars routine? Do you have a special, special breakfast? Do you do the what do they eat over there? The sausage thing?
Bangers and mash, I think.
Yes, yeah. Bangers and mash. Is there a special Nick Whalen London Jaguars ritual?
No, there's not. Normally, this is usually a pretty sullen affair for the last 5 to 7 years, especially. It's kind of an embarrassment usually for me because I wake up with a bunch of texts of like, whoa, the Jaguars are on. Because people are shocked that this team is on watchable television and you don't have to go to, NFL Reddit streams just to catch a glimpse of this game. Yeah. So normally it's just kind of me fielding a lot of texts and kind of having to be like, yeah, this is what I watch every week. This is how it is. Yes, they are going to lose this game. So it's less of a holiday and more of a kind of a day of mourning for me.
Very good. Very good. And I'm glad you brought up Russell Wilson too, because I saw that high knee thing. He told reporters on Wednesday that he was, stretching and doing high knees down the aisle on the airplane. Nick, have you seen The Wolf of Wall Street? I know you're not a big movie guy. Have you seen that?
You're right. I have seen Wolf of Wall Street, surprisingly.
Okay. So, when they're flying over to Europe and he's messed up on drugs, but they have to basically triple seatbelt him in. I think they have to do that with Russell Wilson from now on, anytime he's on a plane.
Yeah, I didn't even consider this really as a possibility. You would think maybe that 8-hour flight would be a chance to kind of rest that hamstring, but not Russell Wilson. No. I hope there's some film of this somewhere. If I can only imagine what was going on, not the entire team couldn't have been sleeping through this. I don't know how you could. If you got somebody bounding up and down the aisles, probably banging into guys who are sitting in the exit row. With Russell Wilson, nothing really surprises you. But when I saw that report this morning, immediately I went to click the profile of the reporter who tweeted it to verify that it wasn't a parody account. It seriously felt like it could have been that. And because it's Russell Wilson, nothing is ever parody.
No, not at all. Every week there's something else. It just gets more and more cringeworthy with Russ, but maybe he's going to play now. Nathaniel Hackett says he's trending towards it. Nathaniel Hackett also could be coaching for his job this weekend. They might just leave him in the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be awfully convenient. Don't they say we still haven't explored half the oceans in the world? It's kind of a pretty easy spot to just, open up that emergency exit and give them a little push. It really does feel that way. It's been that much of a disaster. It kind of feels like Hackett and Russell Wilson are splitting the blame. And I think in some ways it's kind of saving both of them, right? Where, the coaching has been so bad, but the quarterback play has also been so bad that it's saved each one of those guys from completely shouldering the blame. And I think that's why Hackett still has a job at this point. We'd have to look up who's the fastest coach to ever get fired, because it feels like we could be heading in that direction. I know there was a report earlier this week that if the Broncos lose in London, they're going to trade Bradley Chubb next week before the trade deadline. So this really does feel like a potential white flag game, not only for Denver, but for Jacksonville as well. And I view the Jags trade of James Robinson earlier this week in that same light. I think a team that feels like it's gunning for a playoff spot probably doesn't trade its co-starter at running back.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up Travis Etienne. His number here on MKF is 72.5 rushing yards. What do you think? What are we going to see out of him this weekend? Everybody is buying Travis Etienne stock, by the way. It is he has become the talk of the town, the talk of Twitter. How do you feel?
Yeah, the talk of London, Travis Etienne. Yeah, he passes the eye test for me. Like he's really fast. He cuts well. All that, all the things that we expected from him coming out of Clemson. But ball security has been a major issue. He had a huge fumble that if he probably doesn't lose that one in the end zone last week, I think they win that game against the Giants. He had another big fumble a couple of weeks ago. He's had a ton of drops this year. So it hasn't been all roses with Travis Etienne for those of us who are actually watching the full game. I mean, it's been a little shaky. What people forget, I think, in this disaster for Denver is that this defense has been fantastic. I mean, they are top 3 in just about any metric that you look at, EPA, DVOA, all the acronyms. So they're really not to blame here. And I think this is a pretty tough spot for the Jags offense going up against this defense. I still think this is a mistake-prone offense. They still have to kind of coach around Trevor Lawrence in some ways. Obviously, Etienne is going to be featured at a level that maybe we haven't even seen yet this week. So he's going to have a good chance to put up a ton of yards. But I would go under on that rushing total. I would go more, on his total yardage. I think a lot of what he does, he's appealing, playing out of the slot, catching the ball out of the backfield. But I like Denver's chances to slow down the Jags offense. I think their defense is better than Jacksonville's offense. And I think that's why we're going to get a really good game.
Yeah, I'm waiting to 15 and a half fantasy points for Etienne.
Ooh, I'll go more on that because I think this could be a game where he has like 10 catches for 65 yards. So especially if you're talking PPR, I really like the more. But I don't necessarily see this as a great spot for him on the ground.
Fair enough. All right. A couple other topics I want to touch on here before we get into some more breakdowns. The Tampa Bay Bucks are a complete disaster on the field right now. They've lost back-to-back games, just lost to the Carolina Panthers. But I want to talk about what happened after the game in the tunnel. Mike Evans walking off the field with the refs. The ref hands him a piece of paper, and Evans looks like he's signing it. Now conspiracies are flying around that he's signing autographs for the officials and that. But I mean, Tampa just lost, so I don't really know why that would play a factor in anything to do with that game. But it turns out, according to reports, the ref also went to Texas A&M. He has a buddy that's a pro golfer. Evans wants some golf tips. Do you buy that reasoning? And is that really what happened there?
I have no idea. It's such a extensive and elaborate excuse that I'm almost inclined to believe it. It'd be awfully coincidental. Obviously you can verify if that ref went to Texas A&M. I have not done that personally. I assume he did. So I'm inclined to believe it. I don't know. I mean, refs got to know that they're being filmed at all times. It wasn't like this was like a security cam footage situation. I think the refs, for the most part, have more integrity than to ask for player memorabilia after a game. But it's also interesting on the timing, right? It's not like the Bucks, just came off this huge win where they got a bunch of calls. I think this would be a lot more controversial if it happened after that Atlanta game where they got the roughing the passer. But, they had just come off getting smacked around by the Carolina Panthers. So I don't think any implication that, the refs are on the side of the Buccaneers, to me, that doesn't really add up. So yeah, I'll give Mike Evans, I'll give the ref the benefit of the doubt here. And look, I'm a huge golf guy. I'm anybody who wants to get into golf, this is great. So I don't want to deter that.
No, not at all. And I totally believe it because it's just so far out there that it can't possibly be made up. That would just not be the thing I would come up with to make up a situation where if Evans was signing something for an official. But good luck to Mike Evans in his golf game because he'll probably be playing golf pretty soon in the winter. I don't think Tampa's going to be going too far with the way things are going there. Then we got what's going on with the New England Patriots, Nick. I'm curious to hear what you think about this from outside of New England. I know what I'm hearing here inside of New England and this just disaster that is going on with the quarterback situation. Who are you going with Sunday for the Patriots? Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones?
Well, I think what they can't do is go into this game, kind of planning to play both or having Mac Jones on such a short leash that you pull him after one interception. That to me is what it felt like. Is they almost felt obligated to start Mac Jones, for better or for worse. And they were just waiting for him to make a mistake, giving them an excuse to put Bailey Zappi in the game. And for one quarter, it looked like we were having a mini Tom Brady situation, and Bailey Zappi was going to run away with his job, and Mac Jones was going to be, the quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts in a couple of weeks, and that would be that. But then Zappi was so bad in the second half that this whole thing completely backfired on the Patriots. I think they both played equally terribly. against the Bears. And now you go from kind of having two quarterbacks a couple of weeks ago to now feeling like you have none who you can depend upon in a huge in-division game against the New York Jets. So to me, there's no correct answer. I'm not going to come on here and be like, you absolutely have to start Bailey Zappi. I do think in some ways you owe it to Mac Jones. You have the much larger investment in him, draft capital wise. You put together on balance a really good rookie season. I think you could argue that the good things that we saw from Bailey Zappi the previous few weeks were soft matchups. They were advantageous schemes. I think Mac Jones could have done the same thing. I'm sure he would tell you that as well. So to me, I would give Mac Jones every opportunity to hang on to this job, but I think I would also let him know, look, like we're not going to pull you after one mistake. I don't think any quarterback is going to play well having that in the back of their mind, but I also think you're not going to tell them, hey, this is your job for the rest of the year. Like I would say you go game to game instead of quarter to quarter or series to series.
Yeah, you just hit on it right there. I think the number one goal and number one priority for the New England Patriots right now is to build Mac Jones back up and get that confidence back. Get him back to where he was last season, where, as you mentioned, he was playing really well. He was the best rookie quarterback last year in the NFL, and go from there. Bill Belichick won't say who the starter is. He had a press conference Wednesday right before we recorded this show where he just said, well, we got to see what it looks like on the practice field. And Bill, I just think he needs to pick a guy and go with it. And hopefully that is Mac Jones, because as a Patriots fan, Nick, I am terrified that right now that they have ruined this kid. And it all goes back to the offseason, not replacing Josh McDaniels with anybody who's worked on the offensive side of the ball before. And instead they go with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge to kind of run the offense. They try to do this Shanahan kind of thing. And if you watch the first handful of Patriots games, you can tell that they're running much more complex, sophisticated offense when they had Mac Jones in there compared to when they brought Zappi in, and they just kind of dumbed it back down. They're going a lot of play action with Zappi, making it easy, giving them the easy throws. And I think they need to be doing that with Mac Jones and build that confidence back up as they go forward.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost uncanny the way that Zappi came in, and those first three possessions, they go 3 and out, and then the interception. But as soon as Zappi comes in, you magically have receivers running wide open downfield for these big gains, and they're doing the split screen. They're showing Mac Jones, and you can just tell he's like, come on, I could have made that throw. Yeah. So for me, I mean, maybe you would know better. You're probably watching every single snap of this team week to week, but Zappi's obviously been good. He's been impressive, but I don't know that he's been like so otherworldly that I feel like I'm missing out on something if I'm not starting him. I think they're pretty comparable at the end of the day. So I don't think you're really losing anything if you give Mac Jones another shot. And again, given the level of investment, you spent a first round pick on this guy. By the end of last season, it felt like he's the guy for the next decade in New England. I just don't think that an ill-timed ankle injury and one bad interception against the Chicago Bears is enough to just completely erase all of that goodwill.
No, not at all. And I felt like watching Bailey Zappi in the second half, I felt like he was like 5'3". I think it felt like it was like Dustin Pedroia playing quarterback for the Patriots. He had 4 passes swatted right back in his face. So Mac Jones is 6'3". I want my quarterback to be a little taller. Bailey Zappi is not Drew Brees, as some callers to Boston Sports Radio have been trying to say that he's the next Drew Brees, which I think is just the most asinine take I've heard in a long time. But yeah, I think they need to focus on building Mac Jones back up as they go forward. And let's talk about some of these 1:00 games this week. We got a great little slate. We'll do the 10x10 here. Let's start off with Kirk Cousins. They're taking on the Arizona Cardinals, and what I think is going to be a great red zone game, Nick. 270.5 passing yards for Kirk Cousins.
I'll go more. I think this Vikings offense, it feels like, is yet to put together a full game where they look great. They've had quarters, they've had halves where they look fantastic, but we haven't really seen it for a full 60 minutes. And coming off of a bye, there's no better time. I mean, they're healthy. You're catching a Cardinals defense that they themselves do have a longer week too. They played on Thursday last week, but had 2 pick sixes, also picked off Andy Dalton in the end zone, and still allowed 34 points to a team that was missing arguably its 2 top receivers in Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry. So I don't think this defense is fixed by any means. I do think Arizona can move the ball on Minnesota as well. So I think we get a back and forth game where Minnesota is forced to throw the ball. So I like the spot for Kirk Cousins. With that much time to prepare and a shaky defense on the other side, I'll go more.
And it's a 1:00 game as well, so I like the more. There.
Very true.
How about Tua Tagovailoa at Detroit? 269.5 for Tua T, more or less.
I got to go more. I still go back and forth on Tua T. I didn't think he looked great for most of that game last week. Miami could not move the ball whatsoever in the second half against Pittsburgh, but This Detroit defense is a different story. I mean, one of the two worst defenses in the league. They've been a disaster each of the last 2 weeks. Didn't even matter that they were coming off of a bye last week. So to me, this has the feeling of one of those games that we've already seen a couple times where both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, could approach or go over 100 yards.
Yeah, before the show, we were talking about maybe Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle like putting up 100 and a quarter by themselves in this one, which very well could happen against that Detroit Lions defense. Justin Jefferson against Arizona, 98.5 receiving yards. You're going more on Cousins for his passing total. You got to pair that up with a more on JJ.
I think I do. I think if Kirk Cousins, is going to approach 300 yards, there's really not a world in which that happens without Jefferson having a big game. So I like the more pretty easily here.
All right. Josh Jacobs, Raiders running back, who's having a very good year, becoming that guy that they thought he was going to be when they took him in the first round. They're at New Orleans, 90.5 rushing yards for Jacobs, more or less.
I think we need to just keep riding this, right? I mean, he's looking like one of the 5 best running backs in the league. And if he keeps this up, he might end up being like a second team All-Pro, which is insane for a guy that a month and a half ago, we thought the Raiders might trade early in the year. I mean, he has been insane these last few weeks, super physical, just will not go down, and doing it against some decent defenses as well. So this Raiders team, I still don't really trust them week to week. They could very easily lose this game against New Orleans, even though they're the healthier and the better team. But I love Josh Jacobs to go more here, especially if New Orleans is still dealing with a lot of those key injuries on defense.
All right. How about his quarterback, Derek Carr, 255.5 passing yards, more or less?
This one to me hinges almost entirely on, Paulson Adebo and Marshawn Lattimore. Both those guys were out last week against Arizona. We saw Kyler Murray end up carving up that defense. If they're back, I really like the less here. I think this Raiders offense has gotten off to a lot of slow starts. This was they didn't even take the lead against Houston until the fourth quarter of a game that looked like a blowout. It was really anything but a blowout. So Derek Carr still kind of feels like he hasn't hit his stride yet. I'll assume that at least one of those corners is back and go less.
All right. How about the Battle of Pennsylvania? Eagles, Steelers, Miles Sanders, the Eagles running back, 77.5 rushing yards, more or less.
I like the Eagles to win this game pretty comfortably. It's a big number. I think they cover it, but I'll go less on Miles Sanders. He's running really well. I mean, he's had some major touchdown progression this year after going all of last season without getting into the end zone. But this is an Eagles team that has multiple rushers. They have 3 running backs that they trust. They obviously have a quarterback who might be the best rusher on the entire team. So I don't necessarily see this as a game where Miles Sanders individually is running wild. I think it's more of a team effort in that Philly backfield. So I'll go less.
All right, let's go back to that Dolphins-Lions game. Tyreek Hill, 97.5 receiving yards, more or less.
Ooh, got to go more. Got to go more against this Detroit secondary. I think that there's not much else to say there. It's the Lions secondary. We're going more.
Yeah, he's got his ping pong table back too, so I think
that's big. Yeah, and I think it's a custom Dolphins ping pong table, so that changes a lot of things.
That is nice. Don't mess with the ping pong table. All right, moving on. Jared Goff on the other side, 250.5 passing yards for Goff, more or less.
I'm going to go less. This Dolphins defense, I think, played really well last week against Kenny Pickett, had 3 interceptions. Jared Goff has 6 turnovers in his last 2 games. He was playing so well early in the season. Was kind of like the white version of Geno Smith early on. And while Geno continues to ascend, Jared Goff has kind of turned back into a pumpkin these last few weeks. I mean, really discouraging to see him play like that, especially coming off of a bye. So I don't really like the spot for Detroit. I'll go less.
All right. Jalen Hurts, back to that Eagles-Steelers game, 250.5 passing yards.
I'll go less here. I don't know if they need him to have a big game throwing the ball. I think it ends up being an efficient game for the Eagles where the defense probably comes through. We see some short fields, some turnovers by Kenny Pickett. So I think we get another really good Jalen Hurts game, but more of a balanced, run pass type of line for him. So I'll go less on that number.
And finally, Devontae Adams, the Raiders at the Saints, 84.5 receiving yards, more or less.
Well, if the Raiders are going to win this game, he probably has to go more, regardless of what happens with Josh Jacobs. I mean, Hunter Renfrow, he's had the concussion, I know, but it feels like he's taken a step back. Darren Waller's just been completely MIA. Mac Hollins really has felt like their number 2 receiver for a lot of this season. I'll go more. I think this is a pretty friendly number against that banged up secondary. Wouldn't be surprised if that ticks up a few points if we find out that Lattimore and or Adebo don't end up playing in this game. But either way, Devontae's going to have the advantage. 84.5, I think, is just a little too low. So I'll go more.
All right, very good. Let's move on. We'll talk about the big game of the weekend in that 4:25 Eastern time window. It's the Niners at the Rams, the rematch of the NFC Championship game. These teams just played 3 weeks ago on Monday Night Football. Anyway, the Niners are road favorites in this one, 1.5 points over LA at this point. CMC made his debut against the Chiefs last weekend. 10 touches, a little more than 60 yards for McCaffrey. This weekend, his fantasy number is 17.5. His rushing total, 68.5. The Rams come in, though, with a top 10 run defense, allowing 104 yards per game. What do we see out of McCaffrey on Sunday?
I think we see more of McCaffrey, that's for sure, especially if Deebo Samuel doesn't end up playing in this game. I would imagine he will, but he's banged up. A lot of those gadgety running plays that we see for Deebo, I think a lot of those might kind of rematerialize and end up in the hands of Christian McCaffrey. This number is right on the border for me. I think I'm going to go less, though. If there's ever a time for the Rams to come around and start to look like last year's team, it would be now, off of a bye in this matchup with a chance to avenge a pretty ugly loss a few weeks ago. So I think this is actually going to end up being a really close game. I would not be surprised if the Rams win it coming off of the bye. And like you said, for as bad as their offense has been, their run defense has been the one thing that they can fall back on. So it should be a good matchup for San Francisco, but for McCaffrey specifically, I don't really love it, running into that line built around Aaron Donald. So I think I'm going to go less on 68.5.
All right, let's talk about the two quarterbacks. Matt Stafford, 259.5 passing yards is his more or less. He's thrown for 260 or more in just 2 of 6 games. A few weeks ago against San Francisco, he finished with 254 yards through the air. He completed 32 passes in that game as well to get to that number. So that was a lot of volume in that one. This is a banged up Niners defense, though, now compared to a month ago when they played. Patrick Mahomes just shredded them for 423. So can Stafford get to 260 at home?
Big game for Matthew Stafford. This to me, in a lot of ways, I think sets the direction for the rest of the Rams season. Like if they come out and get out physicaled and smacked around and he's sacked 6 times, like the last time against the 49ers, I think you really start to sound the alarm bells for this Rams season and the direction that they're heading. But coming out of the bye, again, you should have time to game plan and adjust for this Niners defense. We'll see if Jason Verrett is back for the Niners. But like you said, they have injuries all over the place. Their defensive line, not quite as fearsome now as it was for that first matchup. I'm going to go more. I think regardless of the outcome, like they're going to need Stafford to throw the ball, like whether you're trailing by multiple scores in the second half or not. Like this is not a team that really has anything going on the ground. They basically kicked their starting running back off the team a couple weeks ago. Typically not a great sign when you do that. So for better or for worse, I think Stafford's going to have to air it out if the Rams win this game.
All right, Jimmy G, 240.5 is his total on MKF. He's thrown for 241 in 3 of 5 starts, and those have also come in each of the last 3 games. He's been over this number. Last time he was against the Rams when he finished with 239 in that matchup, so just short. But as you mentioned, Deebo Samuel is a little banged up. He might not be good to go. So what do you think we see out of Jimmy G on Sunday?
Yeah, this is a really good line set by Brian over at MKF. So props to him on that.
Nice job, Brian.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Christian McCaffrey in some ways makes me feel better about it just because he could give you like 7 catches and 75 yards out of the backfield, which you don't really think of that as being like part of this downfield passing game, but it all counts the same. But I think I'll go less here. I do, for whatever reason, even though the Rams have just been kind of a disaster, I feel like this is a good spot. I think they're catching the Niners at a decent time coming off the bye. And Jimmy G, had some pretty rough plays last week against the Chiefs, some ups and some major downs. And I think we're kind of in that same zone with him where, one week you're like, hey, maybe this guy can win us the Super Bowl. And another week, you see why they went out and drafted Trey Lance.
Yep. All right. Cooper Kupp, 98.5 receiving yards, 8.5 receptions. I'm not even going to break it down. Any reason to go less?
Nope. We're going more. We're going more until proven otherwise.
All right, very good. And then Deebo, as we talked about, he's got that hamstring issue. It's a potential cause for concern here, but his number is 60.5 on MKF. This is a number he's only hit in 3 of 7 games. One of those, though, was against the Rams, where he went 6 catches, 115 yards, and that touchdown.
Yeah, and like half of those yards came on that touchdown where he broke like 15 tackles on the way to the end zone. I'm inclined to go less here just because I don't trust that Deebo's going to finish this game. Like I think he probably starts, but it feels like 50% of the time, even when he comes in fully healthy, he ends up, getting banged up. It's just the style of play that he has. So the fact that he's already dealing with an injury early in the week, to me, that's a red flag. And I don't really like making bets or doing props like that where you're just kind of like hoping for an injury, but to me, it feels a little too likely to happen here. And, you can see a scenario where Deebo's just, his snaps are limited. He's on the bench in the second half. So to me, it's not worth the risk.
All right, very good. Let's move on. Let's talk about Sunday Night Football. The Packers at the Bills. The Buffalo Bills are 11-point favorites in this one. They're coming in off the bye. Green Bay coming in after losing to the Commanders. Nick, what's the feeling in Wisconsin about this team, and more specifically the quarterback? Because Twitter right now is just talking about Buffalo like dropping a 50 burger on them and winning this game by like 30 points.
I can tell you that that's the expectation around here as well. There is not a lot of faith in this team. I think a lot of people kind of shifted their opinion on Aaron Rodgers over the last couple of years. So I wouldn't say people have like turned on him. I think that kind of already happened. But you're now starting to see some people come at Matt LaFleur. I think there's just been a lot of questions about this entire team. Like when they've struggled in the past few years, Aaron Rodgers, I think, has caught a lot of the heat specifically. And that's still happening, but they've failed in so many areas this season that I don't think it's fair to pin it on just Rodgers. So it's the mood is general frustration, but at the same time, I think most people that I've talked to at least have accepted that this is just not going to be a successful season for the Packers. I think there's been a general abandonment of hope after last week, especially. And I mean, this is just the worst possible matchup, right? After losing to the Commanders, losing to the Jets, losing to the Giants, barely beating the Patriots. The last thing you want to see is not only playing the Bills, but going on the road to play the Bills on national TV. So maybe people who haven't been watching these full games and are only watching the Packers on Red Zone, I think the fear is that the Packers are now going to be exposed on a national level. And I love this spot for the Bills. I think this, people are saying this could be like a, 48-3 type of game. Would not be surprised at all. I think the Bills are the rare type of team that they kind of revel in these opportunities. Like I think if they can run up the score, they'll do it.
Yeah. Remember a couple of years ago when they were on Sunday night against Pittsburgh and they they had that huge celebration in the end zone when they ran back the pick six. I think that game was like 37-3. Yeah. That could be what we're in store for Sunday night, but let's break down a couple of these contests. Aaron Rodgers, 240.5 passing yards. He's reached 241 in 3 of 7 games, but as you mentioned and talked about, that Bills defense is a buzzsaw right now. The entire team is a buzzsaw right now. They're 10th in passing yards allowed. They're allowing just 205 yards per game.
Yeah, man, it's awful for the Packers. I won't take the less on anything here. I don't really see the path, and I've thought hard about this. Like, because we've seen so many of these big upsets the last couple of weeks. People forget the Bills lost to the Jags last year, like mid-season, right when they were rolling. The Jags were a complete mess. Yeah, right. It's not inconceivable, but that the Packers could win this game just based on the chaos that's been this NFL season. But I don't know. Like the Packers couldn't move the ball. They didn't get a single first down on the Washington Commanders defense. It's like, what's the blueprint? Like, how is that just going to change all of a sudden against Buffalo? So I think this is going to be just a complete disaster game for Green Bay. I think that's the most likely outcome is that they're down like 28-3 at the half, and it's just a slow bleed out from there. I will take the less on Aaron Rodgers for sure. I would take the more on like Jordan Love, 5 snaps played in this game. I could see him finishing it out. It's going to be ugly.
All right, very good. Josh Allen, 299.5 more or less for passing yards. He's reached 300 in 4 of 6 games, but Green Bay is the top-ranked defense when it comes to guarding the pass. They're allowing just 168 yards per game through the air. Are they that good, or is this more about who they've played?
They're not that good. I mean, they've some of that is like they've given up some big penalties that essentially function as big plays through the air. And a lot of it is the schedule that they played. They've played the Bears, they played the Giants, they played the Jets, they played the Commanders. These are not high volume.
Yeah, I'm going through the quarterbacks right now. Taylor Heineke, Zach Wilson, Daniel Jones, Bailey Zappi, Brady had a horrible game. Justin Fields. Yeah, it hasn't been good.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of talent on this defense, that's for sure. There's no question about that. But no, I don't think they're a good passing defense. I don't think they're really good at anything at this point. I saw a stat a couple of weeks ago that despite being one of the best teams against the pass in terms of yards allowed, the Packers have allowed the most yards of any team just on crossing routes this year, which if you're watching the game, that absolutely checks out. They've really struggled, passing guys off as they go across the field, linebackers to corners, things like that. And the Bills do that about as well as anybody. The Bills and the Chiefs are the two teams that you really think about with that kind of scheming. So, again, like with how chaotic this season has been, like watch the Packers come out and somehow make this a 1-score game. But on paper, I think this is just a huge, huge smash spot for the Buffalo Bills. So I'll go more on that number for Josh Allen.
All right, a couple skill guys here. Stephon Diggs, 91.5 receiving yards. He's reached 92 in 4 of 6 games. He's had back-to-back big weeks going into that bye. There's another one in store for Sunday night, or is he going to have Jair Alexander in his pocket all night long?
Well, Jair Alexander was, last seen getting dominated by Terry McLaurin on 3 huge plays in that game, including the game-sealing touchdown and the game-sealing first down late in the fourth quarter. So rough week for Jair Alexander, who after the game declared that he's still the best cornerback in the league, despite getting completely owned by Terry McLaurin. So we're just going to say that didn't matter, I guess. But they've also been hesitant to have Jair Alexander travel with guys. You think back to week 1, he said he was begging all week to shadow Justin Jefferson. It didn't happen. Jefferson went off. That's just not the way that they play defense. So I don't think it really matters. I think Diggs pretty easily eclipses this number, 91.5.
All right. And then let's talk about Aaron Jones here quickly. 49.5 rushing yards, 13.5 fantasy points. He has a total of 42 rushing yards combined in his last 2 games. But he's coming off a game, though, where he was basically the wide receiver, 9 catches, 53 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So what do we see out of AJ?
I like the more on the fantasy points, the less on the rushing yards. The Packers keep saying it. They keep saying they need to get him the ball, but they don't do it. And I think at this point, we kind of have to give up that ghost. It's not going to happen. And obviously, this is a terrible matchup, too, if you're trying to run the ball. I think that's the other thing. So, they've forgotten to give him the ball against some bad rushing defenses. I don't think this is the week that it happens against this Bills defense. But like you said, they're still finding ways to get him involved. Aaron Rodgers is throwing more short passes than ever. He absolutely loves dumping it down on like a 3rd and 11. So that's where Aaron Jones has kind of made a lot of his hay in terms of fantasy. Like it feels like it's been a disastrous year for him, but in PPR leagues, he's been okay.
All right. Very good. Nick, anything else this week we should have our eye on?
Not too much, man. I mean, looking forward to the early wake up for the Jags. Looking forward to not having to like constantly click around to find different streams when it cuts off randomly. So that'll be cool. But other than that, I mean, it's just with all like the gambling and fantasy involvement that we have week to week, like I've just found myself like stressed out during these games every Sunday. Like how many games have you felt like comfortable at halftime where you're like, this is over, I could just sit back and I'm going to win this bet? Like it just doesn't happen anymore. It's fun, but it's stressful.
No, yeah, not at all. I mean, outside, I'm hoping that Sunday night game can just throw a little money on the Bills as long as it stays underneath 2 touchdowns. But then again, you never know. Green Bay could just show up and keep that game close all night long.
That's how I felt this past Monday. I had a lot of interest in the New England Patriots winning that game straight up. It's all I needed, and it did not happen. I mean, nothing. You can't count on anything anymore. No,
you can't. You certainly cannot. As we mentioned, 14 teams are either 4-3 or 3-4 right now. So the NFL really has become a parity-driven league, but we still watch it anyway. So anyways, Nick, it's been a pleasure as always. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight, and good luck on your contest.